They will chain you, like Prometheus, to a rock, where the memory of your own greatness will gnaw you.
To the education revolution, we've added a massive investment of up to $4.7 billion in a new national broadband network to be made available to 98% of Australians. This will be fibre optic to the node, 12 megabits per second, and capable of upscaling. It'll be laid out over 5 years in partnership with the private sector. In the 19th century, we built railroads. In the 21st century, nation builders are laying out new high-speed railroads of the future, and it's called broadband. We have that vision, we have that plan, and we have acted on it, while the government has sat there in stony silence. Because this government, rather than laying out a broadband network, has not been laying out anything at all. A high-speed national broadband network helps turbocharge businesses, small businesses in particular. It assists e-education and e-health, and it helps overcome the tyranny of distance for those in regional and remote Australia. But once again, Australia has fallen badly behind our competitors, while this government has fiddled and fiddled and fiddled some more. You know, they ridiculed our proposal when we first put it out only a few weeks ago. Guess what? They've shut up. The reason they've shut up is because everyone around the country says this is a very good idea.
Now, while you cool yourself down, a little bit of growing pressure for a review of the $43 billion national broadband network.
Key independents may now back the opposition's plans to stop the NBN becoming a monopoly wholesaler of internet services. So, should there be more scrutiny or should the NBN just be scrapped? Let's ask Neil Mitchell from 3AW in Melbourne, Jason Morrison from 2GB in Sydney. Neil, should we rethink the whole NBN rollout before it goes too far?
Yeah, I think we should. This makes me shudder, this. The government's got such a bad record of implementation with the building education revolution, the pink bats, the solar schemes. It really makes me shudder the potential to get things wrong here. The NBN company seems to be changing its business plan, or it's changing some of its ideas at the moment. That'll be announced later today. We don't really know what the cost will be to the consumer, how much it'll cost you to set up in each individual house and each individual room, and how much to run. And yet we're talking about spending $43 billion. I don't doubt we need this sort of network. I do not trust government to do it. By all means, let's have a good rethink before we actually start it.
And Jason, the thing that sticks with me is it could be obsolete in 30 to 50 years, so...
30 to 50 years is pretty generous. Technology. Think about 30 to 50 years ago with technology. Think about 10 years ago with internet technology.
Oh, that's no excuse not to do anything, though.
Dave, the point I'm making here is that look at infrastructure priorities in Australia. Anywhere, ask anyone, are they talking about having faster internet, or are they talking about the ability to get around, the ability to live better lives, the ability to be healthier and to live longer? I'm not sure they're talking about getting it into their little devices faster. And that's the problem. It's a priority issue. If this country had all those other issues and those boxes ticked, we'd do this. But 30 to 50 years' time, this will not be leading-edge technology. In 10 years' time, most people will be getting their internet via wireless. Most experts say that. Not radio announcers, but experts. So I think we're at the point where we're spending money on something which feels good for now, but it won't last for the future.
But see, we had this argument for the Snowy Mountain scheme. We had it for the building of the Opera House, and then 10 or 15, 20 years later we go, wasn't that a great idea?
But the Opera House is still as first class as it was. I mean, that's not a fair comparison.
You need fibre optic, though, to get between wireless hubs and things like that.
What about the fella that right now is sitting in his truck on his little device, his iPod, reading through his emails? I mean, he's not using infrastructure that we're talking about here.
No. Well, but you need fibre, because he's got a local wireless thing that he hooks into, but there's fibre to get to the wireless thing.
Does the taxpayer have to pay for that, or do the phone companies look after that?
See,
Troglodyte.
I reckon we're all into technology. That's the future. We're a smart country. We've got to be wired up.
You've got to do it. You've got to do it, but you've got to do it properly. That's the problem here. I'm not convinced you're going to do it properly.
No.
All right.
I agree with that.
Graham Richardson is one of Labor's best-known power brokers, but last week he claimed the government had failed to set out an agenda. This is how Julia Gillard responded in Question Time.
I don't know if this is going to strike the Leader of the Opposition as a grand surprise, but the answer is no. I don't agree with that critique from a private citizen, which to the best of my recollection, I have met once in my life.
There you go. The Prime Minister dismissed the criticism as political point scoring. Well, private citizen Graham Richardson joins us now. Good morning.
And good morning, Mel.
Were you insulted?
No, not at all. I mean, it's an accurate description. I am a private citizen, so she's entitled to say that, and you wouldn't expect her to gleefully agree with what I had to say. I said she had no plan and no agenda, so I'm not surprised that she doesn't agree. But I think it needed to be said, and I can tell you some very senior people in the party rang me as soon as the column appeared last Friday and said, good on you. So I think it's, what I'd like to see not happen is what happened with Kevin Rudd, where everyone was too frightened to have any criticism and you couldn't say anything was wrong. Clearly, after 4 or 5 months, there should be a new agenda. I can't see one, can you?
Where do you think they begin? What are some of the things that should be put on the table?
Climate change is the obvious place.
Yep.
I mean, we're now told that there's going to be arguments for a carbon tax sent to the Productivity Commission. But isn't it extraordinary that after all this time, and what is it, 2 years since Kevin Rudd said it was the biggest issue in the globe, there still isn't a policy. There was one for a while, an ETS, which became a CPRS, it's all the same thing. That got dumped. There's still nothing there. If there's going to be an agenda for economic reform, what is it? I don't think any of us know that yet. I think all of those things need to be spelled out, because you can't just keep running on a Rudd agenda that was failing. You have to have a new one, and I just don't think there is one yet.
Is Julia Gillard taking advice? Should she be listening to more people? Should she be listening to you? Should she be listening to the senior members that you mentioned that agreed with what you wrote? Well,
often it depends on how many of those senior people in the Cabinet in particular are prepared to go to with the criticism, not just sort of agree with me from the sidelines. But I think some of them have. I think that there seems to be a growing consensus among senior people in the party that maybe there need to be some changes in the staff, some additions to get a few people in there who are a little bit more in touch with what's going on the ground. I think that's what's happening. I hope.
A bit more experienced? Do you think they're all a bit young and fresh? I
think some of them are, yeah. I think there needs to be a few older hands who can sort of lead it back to where the mob are, because I think one of the things that worries me is that there doesn't seem to be much contact with ordinary Australians, and I really think there needs to be. Where
do you think the Labor Party needs to go now?
Well, it's got to work out what it wants to be. Yeah. If it wants to be a party of the left, then it has to start taking the Greens on much more dramatically than it has in the past. And I think, it's broad enough to be able to get some of those Green votes back, the ones that have leaked. But it needs to have an agenda to do that. Again, when you talk about agenda, there's no social agenda either. I mean, you're having this big argument about gay marriage. Mark Abbib apparently is in trouble because he had dared to say the other day that he thought it was a good idea to approve it. It seems to me that people have just got to get over these things. If you want to try and get votes back from the Greens, then you have to start having an agenda of that kind. And the Greens, they're getting bigger and bigger all the time. The other thing I think I said the other day that she needed to do was expose the Greens. I mean, some of their policies are really quite mad. And no one ever talks about them. The Greens are allowed to get away with it, largely, I think, because Bob Brown's probably the most effective politician in Australia. He puts that kind, nice and gentle face on it all, and away they go.
And as we certainly found on Sunrise, at a time when there was options were almost limited, they were certainly a viable alternative. I just want to ask you quickly, National Broadband Network, do you think it needs a rethink now?
Well, I listened to Conroy yesterday saying it didn't. He argues very well, Conroy, and it's hard to disagree with him. But that having been said, there are now so many people saying that there's something wrong with it that sometimes you shouldn't be frightened of review. If you're confident that what you've got to sell is good enough, then people will still buy. I think I'd probably risk some form of review, yeah.
Good point. Good to talk to you.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks. Have a good day.
I'll do my best.
Koshi, it's all yours.
Look, a quick follow-up from yesterday's debate between the Greens and the Nationals. Take a look at this as a reminder. So you believe in a carbon tax, a resources tax, increase public transport, restrict air travel, and also get rid of credit. Lending and stuff like that.
Not at all. That is a complete. I don't know where you've got that from, because I just announced yesterday that we would support a loan guarantee fund for large-scale renewables, for geothermal. We are out.
Now, that sent the Greens media office into a bit of a meltdown. Christine's key advisor, Tim Hollow, wanted to know why we thought it was Greens policy. Well, Tim, because your leader, Bob Brown, is renowned for supporting what's called a steady steady-state economy. Now, the Sydney Morning Herald reported just 2 weeks ago, Brown won't say it so simply, but what the Greens advocate is not socialism, it is an economy that doesn't grow. It's what we talked about yesterday. And indeed, Brown again mentioned his dislike for conventional economics at his party's official campaign launch 2 weeks ago. The points we put to Christine yesterday were the key features of a steady-state economy, that theory. Well, Christine then insisted it wasn't official Greens policy, particularly the concept of getting rid of credit. We fully accept that. But we do wonder why the Greens dance around their position on a steady-state economy. It's pretty important to our vote. Even while Tim Hollow was complaining to us yesterday, he wrote in his email, while the Greens are sympathetic to steady-state economics, it does not form part of our policy. Well, Tim, you can excuse people for being confused. And by the way, we also notice this particular tweet from Tim after yesterday's debate. He said, wow, Sunrise is so determined to make the Greens look bad, they're taking down positive comments about Christine Mill. Tim, that's a complete lie. It does no favours to many well-intentioned people you represent. We never, ever, ever, ever censor our soapbox, Facebook or Twitter, unless, of course, someone swears on it, we take down. When we challenged Tim on his tweet yesterday, he emailed back saying I was repeating something that someone told me by several people who were watching the forum closely. So, Tim, once again, don't blame people for seriously questioning things you say. You know, listen to us, watch it, and explain.